Good afternoon. So we have 30 minutes. Within 30 minutes, 29 minutes, 57 seconds, going to go to China and back, which is 6,753 kilometers to be specific. All right, so before that, we're going to take a quick stop in Belgium. So let me grab this. Okay, so this is Agio. This is where our company is, and we are based in Belgium. We have 3 parts. This is just so that you roughly know what we do. We are a legal firm, right? We are also an audit firm. And the third part is Agio Capital, where we work. And that's, of course, is the most important piece. And most of our work is related to China and Belgium, or China and Europe. So we help companies find licensing partner, finding capital funding, co-development. So that's one piece of work. And since the end of last year, we also become an investor. So we help company develop their business in China, doing a joint venture with them, help them grow and land in China. So that's a different story. We're not gonna be talking about that today. Okay, so very quickly, a personal story, always a good way to start. You see, this is, maybe I'll do a very quick show of hands. How many of you have been to China? Almost everybody, okay. So, and Shanghai? Okay, so the only place you've been to China is Shanghai. Okay, so when you look at this picture, it depends on when you are there, you would recognize that this is the left-hand side, your left-hand side is what Shanghai looks like today. And there's a river in between, and this bright, shiny place is called Pudong, is the business district of Shanghai. On the right-hand side is actually the old Shanghai, which is, not talking about that picture, but to the right-hand side of the Pudong is the old Shanghai where Shanghai is. The other picture was taken about 30 years ago. 30 years ago. That was when I graduated MBA, first time set foot in Shanghai. And as you can see, there is nothing across there in Pudong. You see the picture? There's nothing there, right? So a main attraction at that time for our MBA, post-MBA tour was to take us into a room and show us a big model 30 years ago, what it's gonna look like today. And in 30 years, this is what it looks like. So this actually, I guess, a picture of how quickly China has grown, all the mistakes it has made, all the craziness. But when you go visit Shanghai, it's a very bright, shiny place. Okay, so the left-hand side is what most people think about China, right? Lots of bicycle and old China. Right? So in 30 years, it becomes one of the places with a lot of the high-tech toys. Right? So China has one of the best, fastest, high-speed rail in the world. Since last year, China has certified its first passenger commercial aircraft, all made in China. Only last year, right? The C919. And it's making the next model now. And then, of course, the electric vehicle get reported a lot in the news. You know about that story. And then the latest toy is the drone taxi. So that's how it is. So I think when you think about China, think about leapfrogging. Leapfrogging is you started low, but because you started late, you skip a lot of the things that normally, all the mistakes that other countries have made, other continents may have to make. And then you go into the latest high-tech toys, right? So this is actually, I think, basically the same thing when we talk about healthcare in China. So coming back to what we're interested in, this picture on the left, about even 10 years ago, at most 15 years ago, Chinese hospital, because there is no private sector, it's all public sector hospitals. There is no clinic. Everybody goes to hospital. Everybody wants to go to the best hospital. So it's ultra packed when you go into those hospitals. Craziness, like people pushing each other a little bit. When you go into a hospital today, you don't see that at all because everything is electronic. Right? So people on their mobile, can schedule appointments and even do tests and all that. So there's a lot of telemedicine now, e-healthcare now. And what has happened from this picture to that picture is a lot of investment. A lot of investment. You look at the top right-hand picture, you see all the big name hospitals in the US are in China in one way or another. You look at that map, it's all US. Right? So all the big names that you know, the Cleveland Clinic and the Mass General, they're all there. They're all there, right? And then you can see that the capital markets really has rewarded a lot of that with very high valuation. All these are e-healthcare companies. So behind the innovation is capital. Behind the capital is a lot of people who want to chase the capital. So if you look at the market itself, despite what people say, is still growing strong. So you consider 7-8% of a 1.4 billion people market that looks for better healthcare. I don't think it's going to stop here. Right? But you can think about, if you are the Chinese government, you need to cater healthcare to a lot of people. Just like I think in Europe, in the US, we need to look at affordability. Right? So you see the VBP. Right? So the VBP is volume-based purchasing, which is price negotiation. So since that time, since 2018, there is price negotiation and therefore slow down a little bit, but it's going to pick up again. The market is going to be there, right? But more structured, more controlled, right? So a lot of engines still going. I'm not going to talk about it. You can have the slides if you like. There's a lot of details. But in terms of the engine, I think the most important point to remember is it's not going to stop here, right? Despite what you hear, what you see in the news. Okay, this is a very interesting picture of how the capital market looks at it. This is MSCI index, and just in 2008 to 2014-ish, there is not much of a movement. It's pretty much a generic market. Until 2015, something momentous happened in China is that they have adopted a guy in the regulatory department who was an FDA regulator before. So they have adopted a lot of the FDA policies and making access of the drug a lot easier. Right? So access meaning you do not need to redo phase 2 trial in China. You can submit your NDA based on phase 3 that are generated outside of China. Now, the cost suddenly lowers a lot. And then after that, what happened is that, well, there is the opening of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, something called 18A, Chapter 18A, allowing company to go listed pre-revenue. Right? So that's the first time that in an Asian stock exchange, companies can list pre-revenue. And because of that, attracted a lot of returnee Chinese who have been working in multinational, the Pfizer, the GSK, the Roche of the world, back to China. So you have these overseas researchers, you have the capital going, you have the much better regulatory environment. So what happens? What happens? And then, of course, 2021 is where the whole globe, I think, we're going into some sort of a bubble of frenzy of the market. So post-2021, which I didn't show here, is of course the same as everywhere else. There is a crash to some extent, but I think it's just going to be a period of time where capital is finding what's the next thing to do. Right? So I think we have the full confidence it's going to recover. And when you look at the next few slides, you make up your own mind how it's going to recover, and you can tell me. Okay. So the first, if you look at China over the last 20 years, you started off with pretty much a generic market because there is no availability. Now, I joined Sanofi in Shanghai about 15 years ago. When I joined, the China market was still, when you have a cancer, when you need an oncology product, is completely not reimbursed, not covered. You're on your own. Today, almost all new drugs are covered to some extent. Right, so a lot has happened in the last 20 years, access-wise, regulatory-wise. So patients are going to demand more and more, right? So that goes from the generic drug phase into the catch-up phase, where you saw that picture. Capital was there was a lot of frenzy going on with capital, heavy investment in R&D. There was looking into the latest innovation. They were acquiring foreign companies, acquiring foreign licenses. And we are, I think now, is somewhere between this second phase and the third phase, where China can become a global player. Right? So when you look at China, we look at PD-1, PD-L1. I think the last time I looked at it, there was 26 programs going on with PD-L1 alone. So it can go into some craziness. It can go overboard. Right? But this is not planned. This is because of capital behind it. Right, so every GP will be questioned by their LPs on how come your fund doesn't have one of those hot items on the portfolio. Right? So every GP has to find a company that has one of these hot items, and therefore these craziness sometimes happen. But when you look at China today, it pretty much has everything. It has gene therapy, it has all kinds of things that you can think about. Right? Antibodies, of course. Okay, so this slide pretty much tells you the same thing, that it goes from stages to stages, from the generic drug to the latest innovation. So it's all there. It is all there. This just came out a couple of days ago in Financial Times. It says, Western companies drive Chinese biotech license deal blitz. Last year was the first year when one of these multinationals started to buy up or acquire a Chinese-based biotech. And there were three or four deals just within the last few months. So it tells you the quality level it has reached. All right? So it may not be the most innovative stuff, but the quality is good. All right? So you can see from generic to I'm trying to do me too, I'm trying to do me better. Multinational was happy to pick them up. Right? Okay, so last year was also the first year where there is more out-licensing out of China than in-licensing into China. Because the graph doesn't tell you that, because the graph also has deals in between Chinese companies. So it messed up the picture a little bit. But when you also only look at overseas deals, there are more out-license than in-license, meaning that's the quality has reached a certain level, where other companies are willing to acquire Chinese innovation. Okay. So I think it comes to, what do I care? That's Chinese market, right? But when we think about what are the opportunities there, we have to realize where are the strengths, where are the weakness, what product we can produce to supplement what our partner or what our client wants. So China now has a very good ecosystem in building, manufacturing biotech items. Right? It has one of the best CROs in the world. FDA has office in China, if you don't know that, just to make sure that the quality of the trials are there. But what's lacking in China is the original innovation and the ability to translate the original innovation into a product. So all the latest stuff that you see, like PD-1 to PD-L1, not invented in China. But once it's in China, it can modify, it can do very nice things to it, but it just doesn't have that ability to come up with, or not yet, with real innovation or the translational medicine. So you go to a university in China, it doesn't really have a very capable translational office. in the university, which, of course, in Europe is very established. In the US, it's even more established, like very commercial-minded, but not yet in China. So looking at that, where's the opportunity? So you look at the left-hand side, there's a McKinsey graphic there. I think it basically tells you that story, right? So China is good at clinical development, it's good at manufacturing, good at affordable innovation, right? Because it's the third, fourth iteration, it's become cheaper and cheaper. It has a very good level of regulatory integration right now. Right, so the file that are required to file in China is the same as what you need in EMA and FDA. And what is lacking is the research and discovery that we just talked about. Okay. So why are we, if we're thinking about licensing to China, why do we do that? Well, licensing basically give you undiluted or non-diluted cash for the Greater China rights. So usually it's bundled up Greater China, meaning mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, may or may not include Taiwan sometimes. Right? So that's the licensing, non-diluted cash, which will help you maybe use that cash to develop other compounds. So who are you talking to? You should be talking to Chinese medtech, biotech companies, right? But they are now also facing some kind of a cash crunch because of the lack of deals in the last year or so. Right? And what is coming up, which was not there before, was the Chinese traditional pharma. So you remember the generic companies that we talked about? They are still there. They are cash rich. But they are now facing a price cut on their old products, and they desperately need new development, new products into that portfolio. So that becomes suddenly a new venue to out-license to. The issue is they are old generic companies. They are old Chinese traditional medical companies. So if you try to explain what your latest technology to them, it could be a blank. So remember that. Different audience, different way to talk to them. Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. So so the best timing is probably phase 2, when you're thinking about going into phase 3, because you remember we talked about if you already have Chinese patients in the trial, you don't need to repeat that trial in China for China market or China submission. So if you have about 20% of your patients being Chinese, it could be Chinese recruited from Europe plus Chinese recruited in China, about 20%, then you can speed up your registration in China without the huge investment of redoing the whole trial in China. Right? So best time is when you are in phase 2, thinking or planning phase 3. That's the best time. So you start talking to your potential partner around that time. Right, so for this, in China, of course, speed of recruitment. We were talking about rare disease in China today, chatting about that. There are more rare disease patients in China. It's no longer rare if you have that kind of number in a Western country. So speed of recruitment for sure. And what kind of patients? A lot of them are treatment-naive patients, which you cannot not easily get in Western market because they have already been treated with a lot of other treatments. But China has that. Right? So it gives you very good opportunity for recruitment, speeds up your recruitment. Lower manufacturing costs, we talked about very good CDMOs, CROs in China, global standards, supplies. The world, many of us have heard about WuXi AppTec, WuXi Biologics. They supply a lot of the raw ingredients for clinical trial as well as commercial products. And of course, for China market entry, because you don't need to repeat trials, it's a lot faster. If you look at from 2021 to 2023, what has happened? Well, China is a bit more accepted because they're more willing to look at early stage compounds to license in. It used to be more phase 3, phase 4, but there are only so much phase 3, phase 4 out there, and there are lots of competition, right? So between Chinese companies for those assets. So they're now more willing to go a little bit earlier, and of course it's more risky, and you have to find a way to explain to them why you're early stage compound is better because there's not a lot of data to go by. And of course, there is always their management pushing back a little bit on what their BD team is proposing. But in general, there is a willingness to go earlier. And there's a willingness to go broader. So it used to be a lot of oncology product. Now they're more willing to go into CNS, neurology, different therapeutic areas. Okay? So broader, deeper, earlier, yes. Okay. So when we talk about funding, if you're not looking for a partner yet, and you're only looking for funding, well, available to you are the global VCs. Right? So the Sequoia, the Hill House that you know, the OrbiMed that we talked about earlier today. These funds all have offices in China. So they're global funds. They have office in the US, New York, whatever. They have office in China, but they are different funds. They may be under the same company, but they're operating differently and separately and independently. So they have different mandates. The ones that are operating in China only looks at Chinese potential investments. Right? So if you have already talked to OrbiMed US, you should also talk to OrbiMed China, because they are different teams. They don't always communicate. Right? Those are global players, global investors, very sophisticated. They know what they're talking about. Right? They know the science very well. They will ask very intelligent questions. But I think this is global. We know that they're now taking a little bit more time, more careful, more to choose from, no different from anywhere else. But there are also some new things going on, is that, well, the government continues to want to fund, more grants available now than before. Right? We talk about a lot of local VCs, which were not so much into the scene, are now appearing. But those are RMB-based funds. So you need to be careful on, well, if you're looking for direct investment, they can't do that. If you're looking for co-development, yes, that's possible. If you have some trial in China, you're running on RMB funds, that can be possible. Right? Corporate VCs, CVCs. Corporate VCs are the ones that we're just talking about. The generic company, the traditional Chinese medicine company, they now have the money and the willingness to fund and look for collaboration. Okay, one other thing. The Chinese VCs are very unlikely to take a lead position. Why? I think partly because their ability to assess compound. Right? So they want to have a big institution taking the lead and they follow. Right? That's safer for them. So that's actually pretty common. If you ask a lot of funds, they're less willing to take a lead position in China. But that's part of the validation that you need to come up with. If you're already talking to multinational companies, you have a big investors behind you, that's a plus. And the emerging source of capital, we already talked about. Yes, direct equity investment, not very likely. But they look for potential co-development, collaboration, all kinds of different deals, including joint ventures. Right? So there are different ways to work with them. So don't think about simple licensing alone. There are other ways to work with the different partners. Okay, so we need to sum it up. So basically, when you look at the market as a whole, Chinese market is still very attractive. 1.4 billion population, the demand for health is only going to go up, and they want better, probably more expensive stuff, right? So, and also there's this Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou that you know, but there are also second, third, fourth, fifth tier cities, and the demand's gonna keep growing for many, many more years. But the environment is a bit more complex. So if you want to go into China, I suggest you consider going in with a partner. Right? Just that takes away a lot of headaches. Of course, it can also bring you headache, but that's another topic. Fundraising. Right? So we talk about the traditional funds, global funds. Consider the China arm separate from their US or European arm. Right? They are separate funds. So the US fund says no doesn't mean the China fund is going to say no. Right? They're all US dollar, euro-based funds. And we talked about validation being important. Yeah, validation means, well, I have a big partner, I got this award, I have a big investors behind me. That's important, right? And co-development, if you think of just want to do something simple, yes, out-licensing would be what you can look for. But like previous speaker says, you have to find the right partner. You have to find the right partner. And you can also consider joint venture, co-development, different modes of collaboration. Make use of the CDMO, the CROs in China. They're actually really good quality. Price is competitive. Okay, I think that's all. I'm sure trying to cover China in 30 minutes, and we're back here into Sweden. Okay. If you want to look for us, we actually do a little promo here. We just published this book a few weeks ago. It talks about all the stuff that I just told you, so you don't need to buy it. Okay.
Well,
yes. Okay, so that's all. Thank you.
Ben.
Thank you very much.